She was just a young nanny, barely out of her 20s, with more hope than experience. When she first arrived at the billionaire's mansion, the sheer size of it took her breath away. Marble floors stretched endlessly, reflecting the sunlight streaming through enormous windows. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high it made her neck ache to look up. Walls were lined with portraits of ancestors in stern poses, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. The mansion was beautiful, almost unreal, but there was an underlying chill to it, a tension that no wealth could hide. Her instructions had been simple: care for the newborn son, but the whispers from the staff painted a far darker picture. "He's impossible," the housekeepers warned her as they passed in hushed tones. Even the most experienced nannies couldn't soothe him. She heard stories of staff quitting after sleepless nights, of the baby's relentless crying, of a tiny child who seemed to wield more power than the adults around him. Some said the baby had a piercing gaze that could unsettle even the bravest soul. Others spoke of midnight fits that lasted hours, of rocking chairs overturned, and of employees who left in tears. Her heart raced. She had never faced anything like this before. She had worked with children before, yes, but nothing had prepared her for a baby who could seemingly exhaust an entire household. She felt a flutter of fear, a whisper of doubt. Could she really do this? Could she tame the storm of a child that had driven away every other caregiver? Yet beneath the fear, there was a determination she could not ignore. She had promised herself that she would not fail. No matter how exhausting, no matter how impossible it seemed, she would give her all. This tiny human deserved her full attention, her patience, and her love. She tightened her grip on her bag and drew in a deep breath. This was not just a job, it was a test of endurance, courage, and heart. As she stepped into the nursery for the first time, the room looked like a scene from a magazine. A large crib sat in the center, surrounded by soft pastels, plush toys, and a mobile that slowly rotated above. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, catching motes of dust that floated lazily in the air. It should have felt peaceful, but instead, it felt like a battlefield she had just stepped onto. The baby lay in the crib, swaddled tightly, eyes wide open. He gave a small yelp the moment he noticed her, a tiny yet unmistakable declaration that she had entered his world, and he was not impressed. She froze, uncertain whether to move closer or wait. Her training told her to approach slowly, speak softly, and make eye contact. But her instincts told her this was a child who needed more than techniques. He needed someone who wouldn't break under his storm. The house seemed to hold its breath. Outside the nursery, she could hear faint whispers of the other staff, judging silently, waiting to see if she would fail like the others. She felt the weight of expectation, not just from the baby, but from the entire mansion. Every step she took, every sound she made, seemed amplified in the quiet room. She knelt by the crib, letting the baby's gaze meet hers. He flailed his tiny arms and let out a shrill cry, testing her resolve. And in that moment, she made a silent vow. She would face whatever came next. She would endure the cries, the sleepless nights, and the impossible challenges. Because she understood something the previous nannies did not. This child wasn't impossible. He was just waiting for someone brave enough to try. With a trembling hand, she reached for him, murmuring soft, calming words. His cries continued, but she didn't flinch. She rocked him gently, letting him feel her presence, her warmth, her commitment. It was only the beginning, and already she knew the days ahead would test every ounce of her patience and courage. But she also knew that for the first time, perhaps, the mansion had found someone willing to stand firm, someone who might finally bring peace to a child that no one else could calm. And so, she took a deep breath, lifted the baby into her arms, and whispered to herself, "I will not fail. I will do my best, no matter what." Little did she know, this promise would not only test her limits, it would change her life forever. Her first full day as the nanny began before dawn. The mansion, which had seemed so grand and imposing yesterday, now felt even larger, colder, and somehow more judgmental. The echo of her own footsteps on the marble floors was louder than she expected. Each creak of the doors, each rustle of curtains, seemed amplified in the vastness of the house. She entered the nursery to find the baby awake, eyes wide and bright, already making his displeasure known with a high-pitched wail that cut through the stillness of the morning. The previous night, she had hoped that a few hours of calm might have left him rested, but she quickly realized, in this house, the baby dictated the rules. She approached the crib cautiously, as though approaching a wild animal. Every instinct screamed caution, but she remembered her promise. She would not fail. She whispered softly, gently lifting him from the crib. His tiny fists batted at her chest, and a piercing cry filled the room. Her heart raced. How could such a small being produce such relentless sound? Minutes turned into hours as she tried to soothe him. She rocked him, sang lullabies she barely remembered from her childhood, and even paced the nursery in gentle circles. Sweat ran down her back, and her arms ached from holding him. Yet despite the baby's cries, she noticed something subtle. Every so often his cries softened when she spoke his name or hummed a particular note. A tiny spark of hope flickered inside her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could reach him. But the mansion was not silent. Footsteps approached, and she knew someone was watching. A senior housekeeper peeked through the door, her expression unreadable. "You'll never last," the woman whispered, a slight smirk curling at the corner of her lips. Her words stung, but she pushed them aside. She couldn't worry about judgment. She could only focus on the baby in her arms. As the morning dragged on, the baby's cries began to take a toll. Hunger, discomfort, and exhaustion mingled in a symphony of tiny wails. She tried feeding him, but he rejected every attempt. The nanny's patience wavered. Her hands trembled, her back ached, and she felt a momentary panic rise in her chest. What if I'm not enough? What if I fail like everyone else? Just as tears threatened to spill from her eyes, something miraculous happened. Between cries, the baby's gaze met hers. For a fraction of a second, his tiny eyes softened. He reached out, gripping her finger with surprising strength. That single touch, simple yet profound, sent a shock through her weary heart. It was as if he was telling her, "I see you. I trust you." Emboldened, she adjusted her approach. She tried a different rhythm, rocking him while softly humming a melody she had improvised. Slowly, tentatively, he began to calm. The relentless cries became hiccuping sobs, and then finally a soft whimper. Her breath caught. For the first time that day, she felt the weight of hope settle over her. Yet victory was fleeting. Just as she thought she had found a rhythm, the baby jolted awake with a shrill scream, startling her and sending her heart racing. She realized then that this job would offer no permanent victories, only fleeting moments of peace. The challenge was relentless, and the stakes were higher than she had imagined. Hours later, during a rare moment of quiet, she sat in the nursery, holding the baby close. Her arms ached, her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but a quiet satisfaction bloomed in her chest. She had survived the first day, a day that had crushed countless others. And though the path ahead seemed impossibly long, she felt a flicker of determination burn brighter than before. She knew now that the baby was not impossible. He was a puzzle, and she was the only one willing to try and solve it. As she looked down at the tiny face finally resting against her shoulder, she whispered a promise. "No matter how hard, no matter how impossible it seems, I will not give up on you." Little did she know, this promise would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. For in the mansion, every triumph was temporary, and every challenge hid another storm waiting to break. The morning had been relentless. The baby refused to sleep, refused the bottle, and seemed determined to test every ounce of patience she had. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion weighed on her like a physical force. Her arms ached, her voice was hoarse, and the relentless cries pierced through the grandeur of the mansion. She had tried everything, rocking him, pacing, singing lullabies, but nothing worked. Finally, desperate and out of options, she did something she had never done before. She knelt in the corner of the nursery, carefully lifting the baby to her chest. Her hands shook as she whispered soothing words, guiding him to latch. The instant he began to feed, his cries softened into gentle hiccups. Relief washed over her in a wave so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. For a fleeting moment, She allowed herself to believe she had done it. She had found a way to calm him. Then the door slammed open. The billionaire appeared in the doorway, tall, imposing, and radiating authority. His sharp eyes widened as he took in the scene. The nanny, kneeling with his baby at her chest, breastfeeding him quietly. For a split second, there was a flash of disbelief in his expression, and then anger. "Enough!" he barked, his voice cutting through the room. "What do you think you're doing?" She froze, her heart hammering. "Sir, he wouldn't calm down any other way," she tried to explain, her voice trembling. "I just want him to be safe and comforted." His gaze was cold, piercing, and unforgiving. "I've seen nannies quit in days, in hours, because of this child, and now you think this is acceptable? You're acting recklessly. I cannot allow this. Pack your things. You are no longer needed." Her chest tightened. Panic and disbelief collided inside her. She had risked everything to soothe the baby, only to be dismissed. "Sir, please," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I only wanted to calm him, to care for him." But he would not listen. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors as he left the room, leaving her alone with the baby, whose cries had already resumed, louder and more desperate than before. She held him close, feeling the sting of rejection, but also the warmth of small victory. The baby had calmed in her arms, and she had proven, in her own way, that she could care for him. Hours passed, and the mansion felt unbearably empty without her. The baby's cries became sharper, more insistent. The house itself seemed quieter, colder, and even the air seemed heavier. The billionaire, sitting in his office, felt a hollow ache in his chest. He had sent her away, yet every wail from the nursery reminded him of what he had lost. She had been the only one capable of calming his child, and he had dismissed her in a moment of anger. By evening, regret gnawed at him. He walked past the nursery, expecting the usual chaos. Instead, the baby screamed louder than ever, unsoothed, unsettled. The billionaire stopped in the hallway, realizing the gravity of his mistake. He had misjudged her courage, her skill, and her dedication. Without a word, he summoned her back to the mansion. When she returned, weary and cautious, he met her in the nursery, pacing with a tension that mirrored his own inner turmoil. I acted too quickly," he admitted, his voice tight. "You were the only one who could calm him. I was blind. I was foolish." Her arms tightened around the baby instinctively, protective, but she looked at him warily. "Sir," she whispered, "I only want what's best for him." He stepped closer, slowly, his usual command tempered by vulnerability. "I see that now," he said softly. "I misjudged you. I need you. Will you stay?" The moment hung in the air, fragile and heavy with tension. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Could she trust him? Could she stay in this house, knowing the power he wielded and the anger he had shown? But the baby, finally calm, reached for her finger. She realized that for him, she had to. "I'll stay," she said softly, lifting him gently. "But understand, this isn't about you. It's about him." The billionaire exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time, he felt humility and a deep respect for her dedication. The mansion, once a place of cold rules and judgment, had shifted. The storm had not ended, it had only begun, but now he knew he needed her more than he had ever admitted. And so, the tiny bond formed in a quiet corner of the nursery became the first crack in the walls of a house built on wealth, power, and perfection. A bond that would challenge both their hearts in ways neither of them could foresee. Something about her presence, her unwavering calm, seemed to reach the baby in ways no one else had managed. Finally, the billionaire couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. He stepped closer, eyebrows furrowed. "How? Do you even have milk?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. The nanny froze, her hand clutching the baby. Tears welled up in her eyes, and a soft, choked voice replied, I recently lost my own baby." The room fell into a gentle silence. The billionaire, a man used to commanding attention and respect, felt a stir of empathy he had never expected. Here was someone who had endured unimaginable pain, yet had found the strength to care for another with unwavering love. The baby, sensing the shift in energy, slowly quieted, nestling into Clara's arms. It was nothing short of miraculous. The billionaire watched as the baby relaxed completely, eyes blinking sleepily, comforted by the steady rhythm of Clara's heart and voice. Weeks of frustration, of hiring the best and still failing, had led to this single moment of peace. And it was not through toys, technology, or extravagant gestures. It was through patience, compassion, and understanding. Clara didn't just calm the baby, she transformed the atmosphere of the entire mansion. Her empathy, born from her own grief, became a bridge between the baby's cries and the billionaire's desire for peace. Every visit afterward was easier, not because the baby had changed, but because Clara had shown a depth of care that no one else could replicate. The billionaire, often a man of logic and business, realized that wealth was meaningless without connection. Money could buy luxury, but it could not buy patience or understanding, or the ability to heal through presence. He found himself watching Clara more closely, not out of suspicion or curiosity, but out of genuine admiration. She had achieved something impossible, not just calming his baby, but touching a heart that had long been guarded by success and routine. By the time the evening sun dipped behind the city skyline, the baby slept peacefully in Clara's arms. The billionaire, standing quietly in the doorway, whispered a soft, almost unheard, "Thank you." Words, simple yet profound, carrying the weight of relief, gratitude, and newfound respect. And in that moment, it became clear. Some miracles are not about grandeur or spectacle. They are about heart, about resilience, about showing up when life has been hardest, and somehow turning pain into love. Clara didn't just calm a baby, she changed a household, and in a way, changed a man. The mansion, once filled with the sound of frustration and exhaustion, now echoed with quiet laughter, soft coos, and the promise of hope. No one had ever believed it possible, until she did the impossible.